Good morning, Emma.
Hi.
Welcome to the channel. It's great to have you here. To introduce you, Emma Ellis is a confidence coach, trainer, and wellbeing strategist. She's been running her own business, Redwood Ellis, for over 4 years after training as a coach with Animas during the pandemic. Her career spans over 35 years, having held various senior roles in the private, public, and charity sectors. Emma was involved with designing and delivering the first ever cultural change programme to over 14,000 British Airways crew members back in the early 90s. And she now draws on her wealth of experience to deliver transformational coaching programs to individuals and organisations alike, and has received some glowing feedback from her clients. So, Emma, it's wonderful to have you here. I'd like to start by asking you if you can tell us about the work that you do today as a confidence coach and wellbeing strategist.
Yes. Oh my God, that woman sounds amazing. Who's she? So I have a client base now where I work with a business. I've been working with them for 3 years. I go back every sort of 6 months, and I work as a wellbeing strategist. Now, I came up with this term myself during the pandemic because I was on the road doing my coaching course, and we were in the pandemic, and a friend of mine was working with a business that was struggling with just checking in on people that were working from home. So I worked with the CEO, and we came up with this sort of strategy, really, that I would just check in on a face-to-face call with all her team and just check in and see how they're doing. Are they sleeping? Are they eating? All that kind of stuff. Just a well-being check, really. But what I found in those well-being checks was that people were really open and saying, if we could have this, or we're struggling with this model, or the telephones don't work. And it wasn't just a physical well-being check-in, it was a check-in with the business and what was happening with the business. And over the 3 years that I've been working with them now, I don't do much wellbeing checking when I see them. It's more around what's happening with the business. They've had a restructure, they've had a merger, they've had new team members. So they developed. So my kind of wellbeing strategy has really developed into more of employee engagement. So I would check in with people, and if they want to talk about their wellbeing, we can spend a whole time talking about that. It's like their hour. So it's their coaching hour, really. And whatever they want to bring up, they bring up. And I love it because I've got to know all the team now, and just checking in with them every 6 months, you just get this real opening. And because they trust me now, because they know that everything they feed back to me is anonymously fed back to the CEO. Now, I know there's whole this thing about being anonymous. I wish people could feedback naturally. I wish it was something that we had as a culture in our business, but unfortunately, not every business does. And even though he's a fantastic CEO that I work with who would be really open to that, people still feel very reserved about really giving 100% feedback. So, we still have this kind of anonymous kind of style with it. And we do a sort of employee engagement survey. So every 6 months I do that. So I've been working with for quite a while. I really enjoy that work. My coaching, my private practice and coaching, I've worked with a variety of people. I haven't really niched. I really and I see a lot about niching, and I read a lot about it. But the problem is I just love coaching everybody. I coach children from Yes Futures, and I coach young people. I coach women my age around the menopause and empty nest syndrome. I coach young people in business through the ABM mentoring service. So I'm finding it really difficult to say, well, I'm just going to niche with this. I'm just going to niche with that, because I'm really enjoying coaching everyone. So my own practice, yes. So I coach with Yes Futures and have been doing for 3 years. Really love working with them. Obviously, it's a volunteer coach, but I have gone in into some of the schools as well as an impact coach, and that's just unbelievably rewarding. Just to coach. When I first started coaching, I was thinking, how are we making a difference? Because you don't see the children that often. But when you're at the end of your, like, 5 months coaching with them, and they just see this kind of turn in them, and it's like kind of, yeah, actually, if I make a goal and I had a plan to how I'm gonna achieve that, I can achieve it, can't I? And you're like, yeah, it's so rewarding. I coach young people. My daughter's 22, so I coach a few people around that age group. I've got through links through parents and some of her friends, really. Again, a really, really interesting age group to coach. They're at the beginning of their careers. They've got a lot of anxiety, a lot of, you know, just are not understanding their own minds. So the coaching that I do around kind of mindset coaching, like how do we think? What are your assumptions, your negative automatic thoughts, all those things that these young people have gone, do you know, I didn't know this because I didn't know that what I was thinking isn't necessarily true. I always thought it was. And those small kind of light bulb moments that you get, and that whole conversation around why don't we teach this stuff at school? Why are we not taught about mental fitness in school? We're taught about physical fitness and we're taught a little bit about mental health, but we're not taught about mental fitness. So this is why I kind of really became really interested in the mental fitness side, especially after doing the positive intelligence course that I think quite a few NMS coaches have done. That really opened my mind into neuro pathways and understanding how our brains work. So, yeah, so that's a bit of what I do. But I'm also a menopause champion because of my own lived in experience. So I do lots of menopause talks to various communities and some businesses. What else do I do? Yeah, and I'm really interested in neurodivergent because that's a lived-in experience as well. So yeah, I've got lots of tools in the fire. Is that the word?
Wow, yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much for that whistle stop tour. There's obviously so much in there that I'd love to unpack with you. And one of the things you said early on there was about um, the work that you're doing with the organisation and how anonymous feedback, and it felt like a bit of a shout out to the power of having a coach that's external to the organisation. Uh, as opposed to leaders that are trained in coaching, as enormously valuable as that is, it feels like there's sort of a bit of a hack there to have great benefits to have an external coach like yourself come in that's not part of that organization, not part of that system, that's able to then collect and harvest all of that really honest feedback from things that employees might not necessarily want to say to the boss or the top boss, but they do feel comfortable saying to you.
Yeah, it is really beneficial. And the changes that the business that I work with have put in place because of the feedback from their own team and feedback that they would have. The team's working from home now. We know the whole dynamics change of working from home because teams are very siloed now, working from home. They work within their own team. It's a business that's connected to lots of different things, but they are siloed. So when I speak to the whole breadth of the business, I'm speaking to every silo. And if they all say the same thing, then there is seriously something that needs to be changed. Which was a position last year that was changed, and they developed a whole new system and put in a whole new process for something because they hadn't really figured out that actually they're all talking about the same thing. And things like priorities, they had this whole issue around priorities. And if one team was talking about it, that was different. But when all six teams, I think, are talking about the same thing, then there's clearly an issue there. So the CEO then can go, actually, I didn't realize that, we've got our priorities, we've got team priorities, they've got their own personal priorities. They've got all these hundreds of priorities, which was making people really sit down at their desk in the morning and go, what do I start with? Because I've got so many priorities. So just by streamlining those so these little things that you can bring in, but definitely having an outside coach, one that's, I've been in business for 35 years, so I understand the business element, but coaching the team around what is stopping them being productive. And I don't mean just by being, well, are they eating, are they sleeping, all that kind of stuff, though we do talk about that. But what is stopping you being productive? It could be, and this did happen in one business I worked with, it could be that they were so top heavy, they've become so top heavy that they had so many brilliant ideas that were filtering down to the kind of the people that were delivering, that they didn't have enough people to deliver. They had too many ideas. So there was too much going around. So they streamlined the kind of ideas phase, and then they've got the people that can deliver. So they're delivering more with less people. So it's things like that, which sound really obvious when you look at it on paper, but until you actually, and when you're in it, I guess as senior leadership teams, when they're in it, they can't really see it. It's a bit like a wood for the trees kind of thing. But when you have someone from the outside that can coach someone, because obviously a vast majority of my coaching is listening, and I'm listening for what is being said, what's not being said, pulling out the bits. If some team have started talking about this particular thing, I can bring it to another team and saying, so what do you think about this? They're like, oh my God, yeah, that's really a problem for us. So, through just those coaching techniques that we were taught, we can just pull that all together and form a picture for the senior leadership team to go, right, this is what's happening in your business at the moment. This is where the pinch points are. So yeah, it's very effective.
Thanks for sharing that. It's funny when you mentioned sort of the business successes that you've seen there, and it was obvious, but not to the people that were within it. It reminded me, one observation I had is it's like trying to getting together in a conference room and then trying to think outside the box while you're all inside a sort of a box in itself. And, simply going outside and potentially walking around the park is not always enough to think outside the box, but having a coach there to facilitate that thinking and that process and someone to bounce ideas off can then accelerate that thinking outside of the box process and really bring it to life and enable you to see things from a different perspective and maybe, a few organizational easy quick wins might appear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is allowing it is presenting the team, the senior leadership team who are making the other decision makers and policy makers with the things that's going on in their organization, which they probably are aware of in some aspect, but they haven't prioritized where their senior leadership priorities of what they should be doing is quite often misaligned with the kind of the deliverers, the people that are delivering it. They're like, yeah, that's great. But actually, to do that, we need this really basic foundation stuff. We need like a really good telephone system. We need to be able to contact each other. We need to make sure our IT is working great before we could even start these really big things. It's like it's creating that foundation then the business can actually grow on. And quite often, the senior leadership miss that foundation. They're thinking it's all ticking along nicely. And actually, there's some really simple elements, some simple fixes, really simple fixes that you can do that you can bring in that will make a big difference to business.
It sounds a bit like an organizational version of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes, yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure that's already been done. If it hasn't, someone needs to go do it now. Just patent it. Um, but yeah, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned earlier that I know one of your branches of coaching is as a confidence coach and a specializing in mental fitness, and you touched on it in your sort of introduction. And I wonder if we could unpack that and dive into that a little bit more. What do you mean by mental fitness, and how do you coach someone on that?
Mm. So when I started this journey, this coaching journey, I was in my early 50s and I'd gone through a career of, working for British Airways, working in for local authorities and working for a charity. So I've done kind of had a widespread of career. And when I went to a conference, I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was the beginning of COVID and I was like, right, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Really? Got a big question. And I went to see a confidence coach. Never heard about coaching and thought, not confidence coach, sorry, a careers coach. I went to see a careers coach. And I never heard about coaching at all. But I just was really stuck and, fiddling around online. And I was thinking, actually, I need to speak to someone about this. So when I spoke to this careers coach and we looked at what my skill set was and what my wins were really in all the businesses I'd worked in, what is it? What was the bit that I really, really loved about that business? And it all boiled down to people. It was all about how people tick, how I motivate people, just about people really. And so that made me start thinking about, how do you motivate people? And started to be thinking about coaching. And then I now joined the Animas and went through the whole coaching procedure. And when we started looking at the basic things that we're taught on that foundations course about assumptions and negative automatic thoughts and the story I'm telling myself and all of that, oh my God, it was like a light bulb moment. It was like, again, like my 22-year-old the other day, you said, why aren't we taught this stuff? This is like fundamental to us knowing how we work and how it's like having a manual, it's having like suddenly at 57, I feel like I've got just a basic of a manual now of how my brain's been working for 57 years. And it feels like it's too late, not too late, but it feels like, oh God, I wish I knew this stuff earlier. I wouldn't have done, I probably wouldn't have got married to my first husband. I probably wouldn't have done some of the jobs I've done. I wouldn't have put myself in the positions I've been in. And, I had the sort of mental torment of lots of stuff that I'd done. So I'm really passionate about this kind of roadmap, this kind of manual, and that sits with mental fitness. So we have obviously physical fitness, which most of us are pretty good at. And even that though, that in my era, so in the 80s, in my town, was the first gym for women. Well, first gym for everybody. It was called Everybody's Gym. So it was the first gym, physical fitness gym for women. It was still a bit macho, but women for the first time in my understanding could go to a gym. Now that's in my lifetime. If I'd have said to my grandparents, "Oh, we used to go to the gym," they'd be like, because they all worked in the land. They were like, "No, we don't. We don't need a gym." So I'm saying to now we need a mental fitness. We need to understand how our brains work. So where we understand physical fitness, and we understood that from the 80s and 90s, and now, my daughter goes to the gym all the time. She understands about getting outside and getting some help. Not just her, but her generation do. They're very aware of it. I think now we need to think about our mental fitness because it affects so much of our lives. It is our lives, isn't it? So for me, I'm really passionate about people just understand who you are, just understand, even if it's just your core values or it's just the way you make assumptions or the story you tell yourself when you're having an argument with your partner, that kind of stuff. So I'm very passionate about that. So when I mentor for the ABM. I mentor a lot of young people in business. I don't necessarily go for that, but they're the people that contact me to be mentored. Because what they are struggling with is confidence. So they're a young person, maybe in their early 30s, who have gone into business. One one young man I mentored has taken over his father's transport business. And he knew the business inside out, but he didn't have the confidence to deal with the older generation in the business. So he came to me really because he wanted some, it was mentoring around business, it was more around confidence. So once he understood how he thought, so understood his values, understood the assumptions he was making and whether they were true or not, he understood what negative automatic thoughts he automatically had and what they were. He, over the 5 months that I mentored him, he just was like, oh, right. So he's got a mental picture of who he was. He grew enormously. And now he's running the business, got no problems with dealing with any of the, anyone around him, mainly because of his assumptions. And I did a survey at the end of when I stopped mentoring people. And one of the things that he said was the main thing was understanding my values. When I understood what my values were, then I understood why I got angry about stuff and why I understood why I behaved like I did in certain areas because, it's things that are getting my core values. So, yeah, I think I've just rambled on, but you asked me if to go. So mental fitness is really important. It's like our core being. It's like who we are. So just as important as physical fitness is, it's important as mental fitness. And I feel at the age of 57 that I have been wandering around for at least 50 years, not really knowing who I am. And I think I would really like to help other people get who they are earlier than having to make the mistakes that I've made in life. I think that's where it probably stems from.
Thank you, Emma. Again, when you spoke about mental fitness, prior to your definition, when I saw that phrase, I thought of resilience, and I wondered kind of where resilience fits within or alongside mental fitness, how the two go together. Because for me, they sound like they're intrinsically linked in some way.
Yeah, I think resilience comes from, for me, and it's just not the same for everybody, I appreciate that, but resilience comes from me from making mistakes and for doing stuff that I've gone, why have I done that? Or where's that going? Or where's that led to? And I think because of the way we parent now and the way we are, we're not allowing our young people to make mistakes. I genuinely think it's because we care so much. We don't want them to make mistakes. I'm thinking about my own parenting here. Um, and my resilience has definitely come from doing lots of things that didn't have any guidance for. I didn't have any mentoring for when I was younger. I had an autistic father and a mother with ADHD, and they were very different people, very different generations as well. My dad was 13 years older than my mum. So I was brought up in a household which was quite chaotic and no mentoring, so nobody to kind of guide me. So I think I made quite a lot of mistakes, which I didn't want my own daughter to make. So of course, as each generation goes, we're trying to help our young people not have negative experiences. But of course, it's our negative experiences that build our resilience. So there's this balance to have as parents and as mentors and as coaches to to not rescue and to allow people to go in a certain direction so they can, understand their own minds as to what is resilient and what isn't for them, or to build their resilience, if that makes sense.
Mm, yeah, definitely. It's clear as you speak, Emma, and all both of the times that we've met as well, that you're clearly really passionate about helping people and making a positive difference in the world through your coaching and mentoring of people of all ages. Some obviously heavily involved in charitable work as well as paid work as well through your own business. I wonder if I could ask you where do you believe um, your passion stems from for coaching?
Um, I think the initial passion came from people pleasing. Um, which I have really that was one of the things that we came out of the first animus, or first few sort of animus phases of the courses that we did, is just when we started looking at ourselves. And I realized what the word really meant, people pleasing. I kind of knew what it was, but I didn't, if you know what I mean. And it wasn't until I did the PQ course that I realized, when you look at your saboteurs and your judges and stuff, that people pleasing was a real thing. So I think and it's quite a negative way really of going into coaching. I just wanted to help people. And then obviously when you're in coaching and you understand the whole framework of it around listening and that person guiding themselves and finding their own answers in their own way, as opposed to you going, "Oh, I can help you with that." You know, once I've realized that, and it's taken quite a few years of coaching to really get that under my skin of real sitting back and letting that person almost fail in stuff and almost fall over themselves and, pick themselves up. And again, that goes back to resilience. It's taken me time to kind of really um, hold back and just let that person find their own path, which is something that our coaches taught us, and I kind of got, but it's not until you do hours and hours of practice that you kind of go, yeah, that's the really important bit. That's the let them just find their own path and let them have the confidence of finding their own path. Because I can find my own path, my daughter left, right, and centre, and she's probably is helped by it in some ways, but actually she needs to fail quite a lot before she can work out what it is that she wants in life, as opposed to all our same to all our young people. But yeah, I think just really just finding our own paths and understanding that.
Mm, thank you. Um, you mentioned there, well, you mentioned, you grew up in a house that had ADHD and autism present, and, touched on the Animas diploma. Now, I know you studied, I believe back in 2 or 3 years ago now, you initially studied for the diploma with Animas, and then this year for the neurodiversity course. And from previous conversations, I know you had a great experience of both. I wondered, where did Animas first come up on your journey? How did you first encounter Animas and then decide to uh, train for the diploma?
Well, I knew I wanted to go into coaching, and I didn't know anybody that had done it. We were in COVID, so I couldn't even have real conversations with people. So I researched a lot of the different coaching courses out there and coaching companies out there, really. And I stumbled across a really, really old video of Nick on one of the, I don't know how, it was a long time ago. It was a really bad video. It was like a shaky, it was in a conference room. And his passion really came through because things weren't going right. I think he got the wrong slide. I don't know whether the sound was working. There was things that had gone wrong in it. Yet he still carried on and he still had this passion and he kind of ignored everything else that was going on around him and still and I thought, gosh, he's a really passionate person. And if he set a business up, then that's actually, he aligns with my passion in doing things for people. And so I looked at a couple more of his video, a little bit more fine-tuned videos. And yeah, and I went through Animus came up to me, well, it came through to me more because of not just the course, but the everything around the course. It's, it's the support we had afterwards. It's a support that we still have through um, the different websites and under these, but these podcasts and these videos. So I'm still learning. I'm on this journey and I've been on this journey and I'm still learning. And well, you don't stop learning, do you? But it's all the resources that Animas have for you once you've got your diploma is incredible, which I don't know whether other companies have. I haven't really looked into what they've got now, but I didn't see it when I was looking at Animas and the other companies. I didn't see that they had this support, and it was the support, and it was the community. Going back to being part of a community is a community that I really liked around Animas, and I'm still in touch with my team, the people I trained with. We have a WhatsApp. We try and meet once a month. We don't always, but it's a really brilliant. And I know that I can contact any of those and say, I'm struggling with this, or what do you think about that? Or can I just have 10 minutes with you? And any of them would contact me if they've got the time to do it. And that's really lovely to have that support still with that group of people. And we did it all online. And I really did think this isn't going to work online. I really, we're in COVID, so we had to do it online. But actually, it did. It worked so much better than I thought it was because I'm a people person. I like to see people, but actually, it was like having a lens. It was like an intensity, and I think with my own ADD, with a bit of an attention all over the place, it actually helped me kind of narrow into it, as opposed to being in a classroom with so many shiny things around that I probably would have got distracted. It did actually help me to concentrate on what was happening in front of me, and I loved the course. It was just such an eye opener for me.
I absolutely loved, and you said this before we met, and I'm so glad you've mentioned it again. Before our interview today, I remember when you first said it a couple of weeks ago. I shared it with the team how when you'd seen that very old video, that shaky old video of Nick with a load of technical issues, but then he persisted through it and continued through. And not only it feels a bit like mental fitness in action, but it also feels like a really important note for all the sort of creators out there thinking, I'm thinking of starting my own business, as a coach or otherwise, thinking of putting some content on YouTube or Instagram, social media for the first time, but then being paralyzed by the fear of it not being perfect. But the fact that they know that it's going to be a bit shaky, that the sound's probably not going to be great, they're maybe going to stumble over some of their words. But the very fact that Nick's video wasn't perfect was what you remembered, and at the time, what made you even more inclined to sign up. And I think I remember you talking about some other videos you've seen at a similar time where they felt like they were a bit too perfect and almost a bit doctored, a bit forced, and a bit rigid versus something that was so real and relatable. Because we've all been there. And I mean, for anyone watching or listening, and this interview itself was scheduled for last week, but then we had a tech explosion and we had to reschedule at the last minute. And that is normal life. That happens. And I loved it when you shared it then. And I loved it when you shared it for the first time with me as well. And I took that as permission for myself that, hey, nothing I'm doing needs to be perfect. And the fact that it's not going to be perfect is definitely not a reason to not start at all.
Absolutely. I think your genuine your the genuine person comes through, especially when things slightly go wrong, because they just carry on. And you see it all the time, don't you, around you? And I think, the funniest things that we see on TV are when things go wrong and people just carry on. And they become like, TikToks and YouTube clips because they are genuine people with stuff going on around them that they've got no control of, whether it's the weather or whether it's a dog or whatever. And I think yeah, I think not getting hung up on the tech and on the look and on the style of stuff is really important because it does stop you, especially if you're a perfectionist or a stickler. It stops you doing the next thing. And I don't remember who told me. Somebody in Anima said, just just do it anyway. Just start, and and it will all fall around, fall apart, fall around into the right place for you. But it's just starting that, isn't it? Um, and not being hung up. And I think especially for what we do, we're talking about people. We're talking about how we think. We're talking about what's going on in our minds. It doesn't matter what our background is. So we're not selling something. We're not selling a product. You're not selling my kitchen behind me, am I? I'm not selling something. Not selling ourselves, but we are people that are talking about who we are. And if that passion comes through, it doesn't matter what background you've got. It doesn't matter whether you've got the right mic or the right laptop or whatever it is. It's the person, I think. It's the voice. I listen to a lot of podcasts from, 'cause I'm very much into the menopause, from Dr. Louise Newsom. And hers aren't perfect. And she's been doing them for years. And they're crackly. And sometimes she goes off mic and comes back. And it doesn't stop me listening to them because she's got something to say that's really important. And I think that's, as long as we understand that.
I agree. I agree. I recently found out that some of my favorite TV shows and classic films from yesteryear, odd moments in them that we assume are script and written and beautifully, perfectly delivered, were actually spontaneous and improv, and were unplanned and were never in the script. So it's again a shout out to just the moments when things don't go to plan, or you feel inclined to do something and share something. That's all the more reason to do it, and you might find out that it works out really, really well, as it did in for Nick's video clearly, because we could look back at that now and pull it and say, "Oh, it's not good enough now, it's not up to scratch, let's pull it off the channel." But then we're denying someone like yourself seeing it and viewing it and enjoying it and thinking, "I really relate to this," maybe finding it quite funny for the wrong reasons that weren't intentional, but then getting in touch and signing up.
Mm.
Um,
It's all that authenticity, isn't it?
yeah, authenticity in action. Um, so you mentioned there that we talked about the diploma, and you've talked about sort of your neurospicy family. I wonder if you could speak a little about the neurodiversity course. What led you to sign up to that, and what did you learn on the course that you didn't already know, as someone who clearly had an awareness and an understanding of and a history with neurodiversity prior to the course?
Mm. The course just was hugely impactful to me, because it was like it filled in the jigsaw puzzle for me. So I had all these bits of the jigsaw puzzle when it comes to our family. So a bit of history. My dad, he died last year. He was 92, but he was autistic. But he lived in a world where the word wasn't even there. It wasn't even a thought of. We just knew that he was a little strange. But he'd been in the Korean War at a very young age. He had PTSD. There's lots of things that we kind of, when we were growing up, we kind of thought, well, all these stuff's happened to him. But also, you don't really know your parents are weird until still you get into your 20s and 30s and become a parent yourself and just say your family are just normal. But my nephew was born in 92, and my mum was a social worker, and she recognised that his behaviour was different. And by the time he was 2 or 3, my mum had him assessed for autism, which was really, really kind of new then. It wasn't really a word that any of us knew. And he was assessed, and yes, he was autistic. And he's now in his 30s, and he went to specialty school, etc. And he's a fantastic, fantastic human being. But when he was diagnosed, it was a time when the adult, well, you were too young for this, David, but it was a time when MMR was talked about, and they wondered whether the MMR jab caused autism. So, because autism kind of showed itself at the age of 2 or 3, which of course, looking back, it would do. And as that's the time that you had your MMR jab, your measles, mumps, and rubella jab. So there's this whole link about, oh my God, so did Christopher, was he like born a sort of neurotypical child and then it was changed, lots of conversation like that, which we didn't really settle for years and years. And Christopher went into a school. When Christopher was about 10 or 11, They had Christmas at mine, and my dad and Christopher separated themselves from everybody and went and just started colouring in another room. And I went in and to get something, and I sat there and thought, I looked at them too, and I thought, my God, my dad's autistic, because him and Christopher are having this really strange conversation, because autistic people tend to like to talk about themselves. They're not particularly interested. They'll say, hello, how are you? But they're not particularly interested in the answer. And they were talking at each other. I like blue, I like red. They weren't asking each other questions. They were just talking at each other. And it was the first time that I thought, that's really interesting. But I didn't think anything else of it. And we just carried on. And then my sister had two other children. And over probably the last 20 years, I would say, probably sort of 15 years probably, the word neurodivergent is new, but the word of autism, Asperger's, ADHD has become more in the general kind of knowledge of understanding. And the more that came out, the more we all kind of listened to. And my sister's very, very focused on this, because obviously Christopher's autistic. So she's a teacher herself. So she's very much more involved in the kind of the words around these, this neurodivergence. So I can stop there. I trained my thought. Hold on. So in the last probably 5 or 6 years, her other two children have been diagnosed as well with ADHD, and it's led me to think, at the same time in my sort of early 50s, led me to sort of to when I was researching, but I was really looking at myself in animus, really. When you start looking internally about who you are, it led me to think, is there something else? So I think I read somewhere that autism and neurodivergence was hereditary, but it's never been on my radar before. I didn't know it was hereditary. And then it started me thinking about, maybe I am, and that maybe Becky is my other sister, blah, 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 blah. So we started looking as a family, we started talking about this more openly, especially as three sisters. We're very close in age. And we looked at our own children and thought, yeah. And it's the last 5 years, I think in particular, we've really kind of helped our younger people. All our young people are now kind of age 20 to 30 in our family. And they have their own struggles with various things. And we've applied our understanding of neurodivergence to them and said, is this where you are? Because we've got a whole spectrum. The word spectrum isn't used anymore, but we have a spectrum in our family of Christopher, who's quite, you would say, autistic in the terms of he can live at home, he has a job, he wouldn't be able to drive, he needs some support, to, like myself and my sisters, who are, living our normal lives, but have struggles, really. And those struggles didn't really come about, the word struggle didn't really come about till I understood what the word masking was. And when masking came into our lives as a word, it was like, oh my God, this is where I have been for a long, long time, where I thought my people pleasing was something. And that was kind of masking me trying to work out how all the social dynamics worked around people. I'm a very, I come across as an extrovert and very chatty, but my friendship group's quite small because I don't always understand the dynamics of the social friendship, especially when it comes to things like PTAs and, mad things like that, where there's no rules, there's no regulation. And I think all of us as a family, we kind of go, okay, so this is who we are. These are the things. And we often send each other, read books and we send stuff to each other. So going back to the question you asked about the neurodivergence course, it opened put so many jigsaw pieces back into place for me. So the most important one was the history of neurodivergence, and the fact that, we are generalists and specialists, really. So you grew up, we're going into the 17th, 18th century before the Industrial Revolution, where people were working in their own fields, literally, of either a field, or they were carpenters, or they were barrel makers, or whatever. They had a skill set and worked in that. And then we put them into schools after the Industrial Revolution, put them into factories and made people working and sort of in a different way that probably wasn't aligned to how they worked. And then we put them into schools and told them to sit down and shut up and read and write and do all these things that we think that, are good for you. So all these specialists, you would call them, rather than a generalist, all these specialists were like struggling in this life of writing and sitting down and keeping still and all of that sort of thing. And that history really made me think about our schooling and about our young people in school, and obviously working with Yes Futures a lot. And this whole like making people into this generalist, sitting them down, you've got to be at school, you've got to wear the right socks, you've got to wear the right, and all of that kind of stuff. Oh my goodness, it's just like blew my mind of really our school system just is not designed for anyone that's neurodivergent. And a fifth of the population are. So a fifth of our children going through school are struggling. And it's not surprising. Then you add the dopamine hits of smartphones and all of that around it. It's not surprising that we've got this whole anxiety, children coming out of school or growing up thinking that like I couldn't, because I'm dyslexic, although I can read really well and write really well, with help with spell check, definitely. My dyslexia comes more around words and around recognizing faces and around, I'm really bad with names and faces and directions. And there's lots of like other things around that I'm not good at. So I went through school, I got scraped through one A level, E in history. No, I don't, she was English, I think. But so I grew up so I'm now 57, so I've got all my life until I was 50 thinking that I wasn't intelligent. I just am not intelligent. That's not what I am. I'm practical. Yes, I can run this and I can do that. I'm really highly organized and I can see how things will fit. I used to run a county show that grew from 4,000 on the gate to 12,000 because I could just see how it all worked. Yes, but I'm not intelligent. And our intelligence, I think, in our era comes from our school. If you don't pass exams, you're not intelligent. And it makes me weep now when I look at that. And one of that history from that neurodivergent course, it was Nancy Doyle that explained the history around it, made me go, oh my God, we've got all these young people coming through. And it's not surprising that they have low esteem, they've got anxiety, because we still are put an emphasis on reading something, regurgitating it in an exam, remembering it, and regurgitating it in an exam. Now, I couldn't do that. I've got a really poor memory. I've got a really strong memory for people and feelings and emotions, but no memory for if you gave me something I had to read and then regurgitate in an hour's time, I just wouldn't be able to do that. So that came out of the course, and that was like a massive eye-opener for me. It really was. It really put a lot of things in places around not just my family, but around the young people from Yes Teachers that were really struggling because quite often we would coach the young people that have been put on the coaching course and their teachers because they're struggling. The vast majority of them are neurodivergent. Really, and I could just see by the fact that they just really weren't listening to me. Their heads were all over the place. But eventually, if you had the patience, they would just focus and if they got one thing out of that, understanding how to make a goal, then they were off. They just didn't need to have all the other stuff. And I didn't need them to concentrate on me and sit in front of me and look me in the eye. I just needed them to grasp the concept of what a goal was and what SMART was. And if they put the two together, then, you know, just incredible stuff that came out of that. So yeah, it really made me think about, and we're talking also about one of the things that really got me was Chris Packham's understanding of what biodiversity and neurodiversity, and I hadn't linked those two together, that we need a different species. We need our species to think differently because in times of like, I don't know, the ice age or various things that's happened in our lives, then we need people to think outside the box. And I love Chris Packham's view of he doesn't even know what a box is. If you send Chris Packham, think outside the box, he'll go, what box? Because he doesn't even know there's a box. We've been told there's boxes and they've got to think inside the boxes. That's how you get to be intelligent. But yeah, that outside box thinking. So yeah, there was a lot on that course and brilliant speakers on there. Some really good. I really loved Nathan Whitbread and Daniel Ahern. Well, they were all great, but those three in particular. Oh, and the lovely lady, Mariella, was it? I can't read my writing. Brissett Bailey. Yes, she was her whole understanding of dyslexia and her whole story around her dyslexia was just so eye-opening for me. Yeah, it was an incredible. As I say, it fitted where Animas opened the door to me for like, look at who you are, look at your assumption, look at how you think. It kind of then put all into place the other stuff that was going on, the masking, the struggling with stuff. And by the time we get to ours, most people over 40, if they're, neurodivergent, they probably won't get diagnosed now. A lot of people are getting diagnosed because their children are being diagnosed, aren't they? So you hear like a lot of celebrities going, oh, I've got ADHD now because I just have, but you don't need to get diagnosed. We don't need to have that piece of paper. It helps some people, and you might need it if you need to claim a PIP payment or you need some help at school. But for our generation, we don't really need that piece of paper to say, this is how we think. We just need to understand. It's like opening a manual again. It's like, okay, so this is our manual, and that will help us understand our lives. And that, understanding that has helped my own stress levels. It's helped my own anxiety. I've had anxiety and depression in the past because I've just not got stuff. I'm like, what? Why is everybody getting stuff and I'm not getting it? And again, that goes back to I'm not intelligent enough to get it. But yet, I ran this counter show that made a profit in his first year. I've never made a profit for 30 years, and I've done all these things that. So it's our level of. There was one of the courses was about eight different kinds of intelligence, and it showed that we just don't have maths and English intelligence and writing and reading intelligence. We have music and physicality and people intelligence, and it's all these different things. And I just think if you understand that, then understand that is just one niche intelligence of maths and English and science, then I think, we can be more kind to ourselves.
Wow, wow! This genuinely, I'm in awe of your answer there, and the testimony that you give to Animas and the course, but most importantly to all of the fantastic speakers and the value that you got. And I know you got tremendous value. You did recently a great post on LinkedIn, your 10 key takeaways from the course, and I related to many of them in there. And definitely, I echo what you say about I think that an analogy several of the speakers gave was, how the modern education system, almost in a way, it's measuring the ability of an elephant, a giraffe, and a monkey to climb a tree, versus measuring their ability to pick the apple, which they can all clearly do, but they do it in a different way. And yeah, that really hit home for me, along with the, biodiversity, neurodiversity. I think of mental health as a scale that we're all on, and neurodiversity the same. Um, whilst I was, enjoyed the course and felt I was coming at it from a neurotypical point of view, there were elements of sort of the different types of neurodiversity that I could also relate to. So yeah, I love what you said about the neurodiversity biodiversity comparison. Um, but yeah, there's so much I'd love to get in. We haven't had time to cover your experience of the positive intelligence course, and the fantastic work that you're doing with supporting women in business, perimenopause, and also the volunteering that you're doing for Yes Futures. We've only touched on that, so we'll have to have you back on the channel at some point. Um, so to sort of round off our conversation, if someone's listening and they're really keen to get in touch with you, what spaces can they find you in, and what would you advise them to do to find out a bit more information and to contact you and follow you and all the rest of it?
Well, I have a website, and I'm really only on LinkedIn. My daughter's trying to get me onto the other stuff because she's in marketing. She's like, "Mum, you need to be on everything." I am a little bit on Instagram and a little bit on what else I'm on Facebook. But so generally, yeah, my website and LinkedIn is where I kind of hang out a bit. Although I haven't been hanging out for a while because I've been away for a month, so I haven't got a lot on there at the moment. But yeah, I think just get in contact with me, and I've got packages and stuff on my website. I'm very open. Don't judge my website, as we mentioned earlier about the tech stuff. I have done it myself. I haven't done a glossy one, but I think if you wanted to explore really the mental fitness side, I'd be really interested in just having a conversation with anybody that wants to understand how I got into this, what's important, even if they didn't want to be coached by me, but just come and have a conversation with me. I'll be really open for that. I love talking to people. I often have coffees for people on LinkedIn, and we just have a chat for an hour or so. As you know, we can we can talk for ages. Yeah, just get in touch with me. I'd love to speak to you.
Thanks, Emma. It reminds me of on your top 10 takeaway posts. When you've met a when you've met a neurodiverse person, you've met a neurodiverse person, and everyone's different. And even if they've got the same diagnosis, ADHD, for example, people will show differently. And I think the same goes for a coach with a fantastic website is exactly that, a coach with a fantastic website. And it's when you dig into the website and reading your glowing testimonials, they speak for themselves. And we don't claim to be web designers, we're coaches. So a shout out to nothing being perfect and none of our websites being perfect either. Um, but it's been fabulous to have you. It's been a wonderful conversation. The time has flown by, and it would be wonderful to have you back on the channel again sometime, Emma.
I'd love that. That's been wonderful. Thank you, David. And yeah, thanks very much for having me on.